Good evening and welcome to the Oshkosh Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education regular meeting for Wednesday, February 10th, 2021. Has this meeting been properly noticed?
Yes, it has.
Would you please call the roll?
Evans?
Here.
Herzog?
Here.
Olmsted?
Here.
Heschel? Salaji?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And at this time, our next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is board and administrative reports, starting with the board president report. I'd like to start tonight with some thank yous. I want to take this opportunity to thank our staff, our students, and our parents for making the hybrid model work. I had a chance this week to visit 3 schools and interact with teachers and other staff members, and I was very impressed with what I saw and how hard our teachers and our students are working, and all staff for that matter, and how well the students are wearing their masks. That was really great. So thank you to everyone who's making this model work. I also want to take this opportunity to thank and to congratulate our winter sports athletes, along with their coaches, their parents, our activities directors, and high school staff who have contributed to a successful winter sports season. With COVID mitigation strategies in place, the spread of and the exposure to the COVID-19 were held to a minimum. And so, again, I want to extend my thanks and my congratulations to all of those included in that sports program. Last night I had the opportunity to represent this board at the Board of Control for CESA 6. There was a legislative forum held last Friday, mainly with superintendents, I believe, and it was noted that there was an increase in state revenues for the 2020 year, and those revenues were above expectations. So at this time, there's not an anticipation of major reductions in school funding, which is a good thing to hear. Excuse me. There is legislation being drafted to look into a solution for the third Friday count. Many of our larger school districts throughout the state of Wisconsin have seen declines in student enrollment. And so legislation is being drafted so that they're not penalized for what has happened during this last COVID year. More on that will come. CESA 6 is sponsoring a professional development activity for not only all CESA 6 school districts, but all school districts throughout the state of Wisconsin. That will be held next Monday, February 15th, and currently there are 4,900 teachers who are signed up for that virtual experience. And finally, just as Dr. Cartwright is trying to get as many of our staff vaccinated as quickly as possible, Ted Knightsky, the CEO of CESA 6, is doing his best to get CESA 6 school staff vaccinated. More to come on that. So at this time, the next order of business is the superintendent's good news report and calendar. Dr. Cartwright.
Thank you very much, Dr. Herzog. So we'll get started right away talking about Oakwood Elementary School. Second graders at Oakwood Elementary School were busier than ever measuring objects around the classroom. Students started off by measuring with teacher feet, then giant feet, and finally inchworm rulers. Talia, a junior at Oshkosh North High School, recently took 3rd place in the Rider University annual essay competition. She wrote her essay titled, "The Time I Wrote a Petition," an English 2 honors class. Congratulations and great work. Communities 2 students are reimagining the program's communication tools. The program has an active presence on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And at this time, students are looking to add new platforms, including TikTok, interactive newsletters, enhanced alumni connections, and more. Students and staff at South Park Middle School recently had a friendly competition with the Rotary Club of Oshkosh. The idea was to see who could collect the most cans of soup in 2 weeks, and the winner was our community. Over 1,000 cans were donated to the Oshkosh Area Community pantry. Carl Traeger third graders have been busy being word collectors. Students recently listened to the job responsibilities of their principal and then collected words that interested them. Students in the Lighted Schoolhouse after-school program at Emmeline Cook Elementary School recently enjoyed putting their engineering skills to the test. Students at Oshkosh West were recently recognized for their perseverance, hard work, and dedication during virtual learning. As announced at our last school board meeting, the district was able to host a staff information session related to the COVID-19 vaccine. We partnered with Advocate Aurora Health to provide this session, which was led by Dr. John Newman, president of Aurora Medical Center, Oshkosh. A recording of the session is available online and was shared with all Oshkosh area school district staff. On the screen, you'll see just a few examples of where I've been spending my time lately. Not listed are the multiple phone conversations related to COVID-19, as well as meetings here at central office. And at this point in time, I'm going to ask for Mr. Kamer to come up and to provide us with an update related to COVID-19.
Good evening.
Welcome.
So similar to my updates in previous weeks, I'm going to start my board update with the updated information from Winnebago County. As you know, every week they put out their weekly data summary, which takes a look at the case rate and the burden status for not only the county and the state, but they look at the geographical boundary of the Oshkosh Area School District and other districts in the county. So it's one of the metrics we've been tracking since the start of the year. And for this most recent weekly report, it looked at the 2-week period that ran from January 20th until February 2nd. So based on that report, the case rate for the geographical boundary of the Oshkosh Area School District was 185.3, which put us at a high burden rate. So again, it continues to fall significantly from the peak that we saw back in November, and even in previous weeks when we were in the critically high to very high range. Hopefully that trend continues in that downward fashion. We also take a look at the individual grade level case rates for our district, and this is different from the case rates that are tracked in the county report. We actually calculate Oshkosh Area School District students who are attending in person when we calculate our case rates. And we look at the high school grade level, middle school grade level, and then we divide elementary into the 3 through 5 grade level and the K through 2 grade level. So looking at those individual grade levels, for the K through 2 grade level, the burden status was in the low range for the second week in a row. We had 0 cases. For the 3 through 5 grade level, the case rate was in the moderately high range. And for the third week in a row, I did some calculations before the meeting. This week would be the third week that we were below the high burden status for the 3 through 5 grade level. So it's really good news. The middle school grade level, the burden status was in the high range, and for the high school level, it was in the very high range. But for both of those groups, it continues to trend downward as well. So one of the other things we've been monitoring very closely as we approach our return to Model 2 is the PPE that we have available in the district for staff and students. So just so everybody's aware, since the start of the school year, we've distributed 33,000 masks to all of the schools throughout the district, and those are masks for both students and staff. So they include child-sized masks and adult-sized masks. Along with that, some of those masks are cloth, some are disposable, so all of our schools have an adequate supply of masks, and we still have approximately 40,000 that remain in our inventory. And again, those are both child and adult size, cloth, and disposable. Since the start of the year, we've also distributed over 9,000 of the tri-fold barriers that students can use throughout the school day, whether they're in the classroom or eating lunch. It serves as an added layer of protection. We had about 400 in inventory that we distributed the rest of those this week to schools that still had requests out. And then the district also has an inventory of additional PPE, which includes specific medical masks for our health staff, gloves, face shields, goggles, thermometers, gowns, disinfecting wipes, and PPE disposable bibs. And those are sent out for staff members who work in our health rooms or who have other high-risk positions. They can request those, and we send them over as needed. In terms of vaccinations, as I mentioned last board meeting, the state has set a preliminary timeline of March 1st for when school staff are going to be able to be vaccinated. A vast majority of our staff members who would be considered 1A staff have been vaccinated. So we're just waiting for the green light from the state. We have partners who we're working with, primarily Hometown Pharmacy or our healthcare in the Winnebago County Health Department. So when that time comes, we'll be able to jump into action and get our staff vaccinated as quickly as possible. COVID-19 testing remains available for all students, staff, and families at UW Oshkosh Testing Center. And in the board report, there's a link to that site if you want to sign up. And then finally, the district dashboard remains active on our website as well. That tracks the number of active positive cases and quarantines that we have in the district, as well as the cumulative totals of cases and quarantines. So as of this past Monday, February 8th, the district had 12 active cases at 7 different schools. We had 242 students who were quarantining and 34 staff who were quarantining. And if you look at our cumulative total since the start of the year, we've had 567 positive cases in our schools since the start of the year, as well as 5,119 quarantines. So that concludes my board report.
Thank you.
Excuse me, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Kimmer? Thank you very much for your update.
Thank you.
I just want to supplement the information related to our substitute teacher pool, as well as contact tracers and accommodation requests. So for our substitute teacher pool, as I've reported previously, in a typical year, we have approximately 160 individuals within that pool. At this point in time, we have hired what we are calling permanent subs. Our goal is to have 1 per school site. We are currently sitting with 14 individuals who have been hired. Number of substitutes currently on the list is 114, but what's important is of the 114, how many of them are actively working is 60. And of that 60, there are 14 individuals who are serving in long-term positions. The contact tracers, what we did is we reached out to those individuals who were in our substitute teacher pool but who are not currently working or do not want to work within that role to see if they would be willing to be contact tracers. So of that pool, we do have 11 candidates that have been trained as contact tracers and 1 that is waiting to be trained at this point in time. Since the beginning of the school year for accommodation requests from our teachers, or staff members, all staff members I should say, we had a total of 62 accommodation requests that were made, and of the 62, there were 24 that were granted. Since the time for which this board made the revision for us to go back into Model 2, since that decision, there has been a total of 5 new accommodation requests.
Thank you, Dr. Cartwright. Does anyone have any questions or comments on Dr. Cartwright's addendum? All right.
And does the board would like to have a verbal report related to the IP paging system purchase?
Yes.
Dr. Gunlott?
I think it's good for the board to give us a reminder and also for the public to know what this means that we're going to be voting on eventually.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We are very happy to bring forward the recommendation to purchase an IP paging system. This is related to the position that was approved at the previous meeting of the board. about modernizing our paging system. As you know, when the West situation occurred a year or so ago, one of the shortcomings we had was our paging system was somewhat antiquated. It's one of the few systems inside the Oshkosh Area School District that we have not improved with technology. It's still analog based and as such has some limitations. So we knew we wanted to move forward with an IP paging system which basically uses internet technology. It's a digital system versus an analog system. Gives us a whole bunch of different advantages. We also, the best news about this is it's not going to cost us much money because we got a federal COPS grant to the tune of $375,000. That means we matched it with $125,000, and that will allow us to cover Oshkosh West High School. This system will go in over the course of the summer. We are recommending Heartland Business Systems, which was the most advantageous bid to the district, be selected, and that will come forward as a resolution at the next board meeting. So I would certainly be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any comments or questions?
I have one question.
Mr. Peschel?
So, when you did the RFP,
Yep.
did you ask for them to provide RFPs in the form of different cycles related to that? Or is that something that the
I mean, where
bidders
some bid 1
provided?
year, some bid 4
Yeah.
year, some
Yep.
bid 5 year. We asked for a 5-year plan,
bid.
yeah.
Okay.
And as you can see in the staff report, some of the information we got back was incomplete. That's not uncommon.
Sure.
Sometimes vendors will send a bid in and they won't necessarily meet the RFP requirements, and we don't look favorably on that. We expect everybody to match what we're going to proposal for.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else with a question or comment for Mr. or Dr. Gunlock? Well, thank you very much. This is very exciting to bring this communications system up into the 21st century.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know we do have some board committee reports tonight, so Mrs. Szilagyi, Mrs. Olmsted, does anyone else have a report this evening? So we'll start with Mrs. Szilagyi.
All right, so and I even have a nice plaque to showcase for our first agenda item. The Education Committee met about our Math Recovery Award. So this award was given to the district for 14 years of providing math recovery numeracy education. And this was given to us, Julie Holmes, who gave the presentation, said we're almost to 15 years, so she wishes this could say 15 years. Because it was 15 years ago that the district made the investment to use the Advantage Math Recovery Program. And as a result of that, the Oshkosh Area School District is, it's able to provide intervention for students. It has instructional support teachers in math in all of our buildings. It's ready to implement SLD rule with research-based interventions, develop highly qualified math teachers, and we are a leader in implementing math curriculum resources aligned to the latest research in how students learn math. And part of that, being a leader and having highly trained teachers, has actually really benefited us, because we have 4 champion district trainers, and Holmes included, so I believe she makes 5. She's the trained teacher leader, and then 4 champions under her, who that training, sorry, I'm trying to summarize my notes, that training saves the district $1,200 per teacher, and it also actually has brought in $20,000 for the district, because we are asked, and those teachers are asked to then train math support teachers in other districts. So this has been a good investment for us to stick with. The other thing that we discussed at our meeting was the COVID-19 data. Some of that had been presented at the school board meeting that all of us saw, but there were a few more pieces, like the progress report trends, the failure rate trends, and the impact on GPA. And we talked about how these data points provide information. They don't tell the whole story behind the scenes. For example, The student login rate shows that students logged in, but it doesn't show whether or not they completed an assignment. So staff members, of course, have to dig deeper to better understand that data. So the information is analyzed, and the schools were notified of which students weren't logging in, and then the schools looked for an invitational lens rather than a punitive lens to get those students back, because oftentimes when they would talk to the students who weren't logging in, they found it's because they felt overwhelmed. They'd gotten so far behind, they felt like they couldn't catch up, so they gave up. And so schools created care teams that consisted of the principal, the support teachers, counselors, pupil services, and teachers that would meet at the schools once a week and talk through how to support those individual students and what kind of strategies and adjustments needed to be made to bring those students back in. At the elementary level, Dr. Kim Brown talked about how we used different data words. What they looked at for elementary students was no evidence. So on some report cards, there's an NE, which means that the student didn't show enough work or evidence of learning to be able to give a grade on a particular strand of elementary report cards. And the analysis showed that there were more no evidence marks for the K2 level than the 3-5 grade level. So both Ms. Conrad and Dr. Brown talked about the cautions and the conclusions gained from all this data, stating that grades are indicators of engagement and compliance as well as learning. So if there's no student work or evidence of learning, grading is difficult and doesn't always represent what the student knows and is able to do. They may actually be proficient at the standards. So the pandemic has prompted discussions about how learning and grading and record keeping and reporting takes place, and especially brought into light our equity work, that some students may have disadvantages that limit their ability to be in compliance with all those factors that go into a grade, and that we can make adjustments to the sequencing and the pacing in core subjects, or adding layers of supports for students that need help, so that we can accelerate student learning instead of remediate it. And again, looking at, which is a phrase I really liked, right? That when our students come back to us, we're not going to look at how to remediate what they may have missed, but instead to meet them where they are and accelerate where they can go. And I really liked that phrase they used too, that the invitational lens rather than the punitive lens, rather than looking at grades as a punishment for not performing, looking at how we can invite students to show up and accelerate their learning when they do return to in-person school. Let's see, the last thing I had was just that we do know that a lot of students are excited to be back to in-person learning. Teachers are reminded to meet the students where they are academically and not where teachers think they should be, and their continued efforts will help students to move forward and help them feel secure in their learning again. Students need to feel safe and have supportive leadership for their social, emotional, and academic learning to be optimized. And we talked about how schools can be the most predictable and positive place for students to be right now. So our next meeting is March 4th at 8:30. There.
Thank you, Mrs. Szilagyi.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mrs. Olmsted with Policy and Governance.
Thank you. We had a meeting on Monday on the 8th, and on the agenda we went through a few policies. We had been asked to look at, by another board member, to look at our whistleblower policies, 3211 and 4211. We did look at these policies and determined that there was no changes needed to be made to these policies because they included breaking state law, federal law, and board policy, and that all is in the whistleblower protection, and that's what it's supposed to cover. That was the meaning of that policy. We also looked at policy 8310, which is public records. The committee requested adding a statement in the policy prior to the title records retention schedule. The statement will read, board members may be notified each time an open records request is made. This policy will be coming forward at our next board meeting for approval. And then we also looked at the guidelines with 8310 and made sure that they went in alignment with the policy. And we looked at policy 9130, which is public requests, suggestions, and complaints. We looked at this policy because of coming out of our January closed sessions. We said that we had 4 bullet points that we were going to look at, and one of them was to start looking at the feedback and the policy for complaints. So the committee reviewed this policy and made several recommendations. The request language be added from the WASB Rule 870, which includes anonymous complaints are strongly discouraged. The superintendent will determine what follow-up, if any, is made in response to anonymous complaint. If the anonymous complaint is about the superintendent, then the board president will determine what follow-up, if any, is made. The further procedures described in this policy will not be applied to anonymous complaints. We wanted to add that in that because of the complaint letters that we've gotten that were anonymous. We also are going to add the requested obtaining possible language from Neola and WASB that could be added to the policy regarding the superintendent complaints and the process for handling those complaints. The committee requested a separate section be added to the policy entitled Guidelines for Matters Regarding the Superintendents, so that the board members are aware of their role as it relates to complaints and provide direction, and so does the public. A space was inserted on page 2. There was some typos. There was a space between 2 and the, and then we had to get rid of an E in the last sentence of the paragraph. So we're going to bring this back to policy in March, and we're going to look at new language from Neola and WASB on having a section in there just for those 2 other things. Then we also looked at the administrative guidelines with that to make sure that they would go hand in hand. And then we looked at policy 0167.3, which is public comments at board meetings. The committee discussed the policy and policy 0166, which is board agenda. At length, we discovered possible changes to this. The committee made no changes to either policy. The committee also discussed allowing audio files or written statements to be submitted in advance to the meetings by 3 p.m. on the day of the board meeting for public forum. We've had people ask that are not comfortable coming to the board meeting to discuss any open agenda related forum or non-agenda related forum, discussing things that they wanted to talk about and they didn't want to come because of COVID. They didn't feel comfortable. And we allowed that when we were in Zoom. We allowed writing those comments, and then the superintendent would read them. Also, we would like to allow audio files if somebody wants to send that in, and then they would still follow the same format as people in here. But we would get those and then read that for people who are not comfortable coming into the board meetings. Our policy also has that in there that they're allowed to do that. So we're going to start to look at that and open that up. It was decided to enforce the rules for the public forum with the presiding officer warning and terminating a participant's statement when it's too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. No names or titles of employees can be used if a speaker can be used when any of the speakers are speaking. And if a speaker is running for an office, the information cannot be communicated during the public forum. Once again, there was no policies made to this. We just wanted to look it over and make sure that we were following it and going back and looking at opening up the written and the audio files. And then also we discussed board agenda with that at the same time, and no changes were made to that policy either. Our next meeting is going to be March 8th at 8:30 in the morning. That's it.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Olmsted. I know that was a lengthy meeting, and it was a very productive one from my perspective, so thank you. And Mr. Peschel, who was also there, and Mrs. Salaji was there. Very good.
I
All
feel
right.
kind of left out.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Evans. You're always welcome.
Yeah.
All right, then. Next agenda item for us tonight is non-agenda related public forum. We did not have anyone who signed up for that opportunity, but we do have someone here for the agenda-related public forum. So just let me read the guidelines for that. We ask that you clearly state your name and address. If you are acting as a spokesperson for a particular group of individuals, we ask that you indicate the group that you represent. Please limit your comments to the time allotted, which is 3 minutes. Please use public comments rather than a question and answer dialogue, and state clearly and concisely the matters of concern. Please remember that the use of specific names of district personnel may lead to legal liability. In such instances, we ask that you pursue the district's formal complaint process by contacting the superintendent's office at 424-0160 to direct you to the appropriate administrator. So with that, we have one individual who has signed up for the public forum, and that would be Julia Solomon.
Good evening.
So we need your name and address,
Yep.
please. Thank you.
My name is Julia Salomon. I live at 1320 Snowden Drive here in Oshkosh. And I'm the mother of a sophomore at Oshkosh West. I want to share with the board some of the things my daughter has experienced through this pandemic as it relates to her schooling. There's many, but I'm just going to focus on like two. Number one, she misses her teachers. However, she states how much she enjoys that teachers are making their virtual classes interesting and fun. For example, some teachers have asked for student volunteers to act as class ambassadors and given students leadership opportunities. The role of these students groups, as I understand it from my 15-year-old, is for teachers to give students a voice, for them to share ideas on how to make the classes more engaging for others that may not be engaged in the class. And my editorial is maybe more palatable, like pre-calculus. She digs it, I don't, but okay. Other teachers have come up with other ideas, and my hubby and daughter and I have always commented on how versatile teachers have been and how incredibly supportive they have been, so kudos to your staff. Number two, my daughter is enjoying the hybrid model. She says it's the best of two worlds. She gets to go to school and interact face-to-face with teachers and friends, yet loves the fact that on virtual days she feels less stressed taking her pre-calc exams in her PJs. Again, I've been amazed at how versatile, I think I'm repeating myself, everyone has been, and I hope you're all proud of the staff. Changing subjects, I want to applaud this administration for forging forward with a referendum, especially during the very dire times our communities are facing with the COVID pandemic. I want to thank our community, too, for voting in favor of the referendum. I also want to applaud the administrative staff for clinching the Super Bowl of interest rates. I don't understand mill rates and interest rates. I'm glad somebody does on the administration. I served as a resident of this district on the Facilities Advisory Committee, which now seems like ages ago, and was just so amazed and aware of the dire state of some of our school buildings. My daughter will not directly benefit from the future plans of these facility renovations, but I am truly excited for the students and staff who will. Next and last, I may be putting the cart before the horse, but I hope that the plans for these new buildings, because remember the Facilities Advisory Committee met way before COVID, so I hope that the plans for these new buildings also take into consideration the lessons learned from this pandemic. Perhaps it's issues related to HVAC, new filters, I don't know. Or maybe spatial issues related to physical distancing, should we, God forbid, go through this again. And also technology. How do we plan for those technologies?
Could you wrap up in about 30 seconds?
Yep.
Thank you.
To maybe take into consideration the possibility that we may be virtual learning again. Hope not. Despite the hardships of this pandemic, there have been lessons learned, and I hope that those are considered for the future plans by the facilities people. Thank you for all you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for coming tonight.
It probably should be reflected in the meeting notes that was more of a non-agenda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good catch there, Mr. Evans. Appreciate that. Thank you. We have three workshop items this evening, and we're going to start with the civility project. Its history and its 9 principles. And joining us this evening are Mrs. Piron, Michael Rust, Walter Scott, Sue Ponick, and Alex Hummel. And Mr. Scott is joining us virtually.
And I believe Mr. Rust there'll be a couple more joining.
Okay, and it looks like Mrs. Solomon is also joining the group.
And Ms. Perron, if you wouldn't mind introducing everybody and just a quick introduction of this workshop, please.
Yes, so Walter Scott, who is on board, I am a proud member of the core civility team. He is going to introduce the members. He has that scripted, but we feel it's very important to recommit to the civility project, which has been in existence for over 10 years. He will give you a little bit of the history, and I'm going to allow Walter, or Scotty as we call him, to introduce the guests that are on screen and also present with us.
Oh, he's muted.
Oh, you're
Muted.
muted.
He's just talking about.
Walter, I think you have to unmute yourself.
Uh-oh, he's like, uh-oh.
Okay, we're good now.
There you
Thank
go.
you very
All right.
much, Linda. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Herzog, and for the full board for inviting us to be here this evening. We appreciate it very much. I was fortunate to be part of the organizers of the Oshkosh Civility Project, which goes back about 11 years ago now. But the Board of Education and the school system was one of the earliest supporters of our project. And we literally, at that point, distributed thousands of posters that were placed in school classrooms. And I think every time a teacher opened her laptop or her iPad or whatever it be, there was the poster of the Civility Project. So we very much appreciated that support, and we've always had that strong support. More recently, in the fall of 2020, thanks to the coordination of Linda and to Gene Madeke of PBIS, it was interesting, we had 5,000 boxes of sidewalk chalk that were distributed to the children, along with a civility card in each one, encouraging sidewalk messages of civility. This was, of course, while the COVID rate of infection was rising rapidly and the children were at home. It was also, it wasn't quite 10 degrees below zero yet, too. So there were a lot of messages of civility that got put on sidewalks. On display in your room, I know you will see a large civility poster, which is always at Board of Education meetings, and our city council also has the same poster displayed, as does Dr. Cartwright in her office. So we're very pleased with that is on public display. Our program is really based on the book of Choosing Civility by Dr. P.M. Forney. His book has 25 principles of civility, 9 of which we chose to be on the cards, and hopefully each of you received one of those cards when you came in this evening. They're really kind of basic things. It's kind of what our parents taught us, but we don't always remember them today. I think that there's 3 principles that apply directly to public meetings. And to what I call a privilege when you're either as a board member or as a guest and you're asked to speak at a public forum. And those 3 key principles are give constructive criticism, showing respect, and being agreeable. Being agreeable doesn't mean we always have to agree, because we won't. But what it does mean is we need to show respect, and we have to make it safe to disagree with each other. That's not always the case. We have several members of our core committee. We actually have 13 of us now on the core committee who are attending virtually, and a few in the room with you. And I'd like to introduce and acknowledge the virtual participants. And that would be Margie Davey, Karen Bowen, Reverend Karen Doreen, and also Michael Rust. And I think you'd recognize those names because they are all actively engaged in support of our community. Michael, of course, is CEO of the Winnebago Conflict Resolution Center, and we've asked Michael if he would say just a few words tonight. Michael, if you will.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Herzog and Dr. Cartwright and the whole school board. As somebody who works in the world of conflict for a living, I have to tell you, one of the things that I think is important is that we have to recognize that conflict can be a positive thing if it's managed and managed appropriately. If it's not managed, you end up seeing me in a professional setting. But I think we can each personally take some steps to manage conflicts that we are in, especially in this type of setting. One, I think we need to assume positive intent. When someone is speaking, we need to assume that they have a positive intent to resolve the problem that you're all working on together. Number two, we need to realize that the other person is not the problem, but they are part of the solution. Working with them and not working against them. And by doing that, we can find ways to work together to achieve our goals. So thank you again for giving us this time this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's well said. I'd like now to turn our report over to our good friend Sue Ponikin, longtime member of our committee, and she is attending in person with a number of our other participants. We all know Sue as the now retired executive director of the Oshkosh Area United Way. Sue retired after 25 years of serving in that role in Oshkosh. Kind of a sidebar to this is that I was actually on the committee that interviewed and selected Sue, and I continue to remind her of that. So, Sue, if you will take over, please.
Thank you, Scotty. And again, thank you to the school board and Dr. Herzog and Dr. Cartwright for allowing us to come in today. Ted Koppel, many of you know Ted Koppel, the award-winning broadcast journalist. And he said, practice civility toward one another. Admire and emulate ethical behavior whenever you find it. Apply a rigid standard of morality to your lives. And if periodically you fail, as you surely will, adjust your lives, not the standards. I joined the Civility Project, as Scotty said, shortly after its inception. And I saw it as just a really good practice of using good common sense and things that our parents and maybe our schools taught us. As a director of United Way, I supported the district's then anti-bullying initiative. That was many years ago, where we provided students with a safe place to learn, grow, and thrive. Since then, I have seen, and we've had successes in the Civility Project. Scotty talked about a few of those. We've had farmers markets where we've been able to share education with people in our community. And we actually have our column every month in the Oshkosh Northwestern that takes one of the principles of the Civility Project and expands on it, and it says how we can apply it to our lives. But most recently, we've been seeing a lot of conflict and a lot of incivility within our communities, our state, and our country. But by following those tenets that Dr. Forney has spelled out for us, we could learn to still speak our piece, but just in a kinder and gentler manner. This initiative isn't about halting anyone's speech, but by saying that it's okay for us to disagree. But we do it in a civil and respectful way. As Scotty said, I have retired. And I'm not slowing down, but I'm enjoying it immensely because I'm able to do things that I couldn't do before. And one of those things is practicing mindfulness. And after each mindfulness practice, there's a mantra that we say. And we say, be mindful of your thoughts because they become your words. Be mindful of your words because they become your actions. And be mindful of your actions because they become your character. And I would add, they also become your reputation. We have an obligation, and I say we have a responsibility to our children to be positive, good role models in everything that we do and say. So thank you for being early adopters of the Civility Project. And I would like to take this moment to introduce the other partners in this room with me. Again, Julia Solomon, I'm saying your name backwards. Linda Puron. And next I would like to introduce Alex Hummel, who is a Special Assistant for Strategic Partnerships, I love his title, at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh.
Kind of a rolling floor show here tonight, I guess. Thank you for having us tonight. I'm honored to be here. I should tell you, I'm the son of two rural Wisconsin public school teachers, each of them logging 35 years apiece in middle school education. So I'm grateful to you all for the work you do to help support this school community too. I'm also the new kid, I guess you could say, on the Civility Project. I just was recently added to the core team as a member of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and we're very proud to be a partner in helping lead it. I'll just say briefly, I've had the chance to actually meet Dr. P.M. Forney. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2018, but he did come to UW Oshkosh back in 2011 and shared a lot of the, had led some lectures and did some interviews. And you said one thing, you know, in your life you often hear things that are pretty wise and futuristic, but he said one thing, one of those things that really stuck with me, and that was the best qualities in people, the most indefatigable, oh, I said it wrong, I'll get it right, qualities in a person are smart and nice. And that stuck with me because I think that's something we all strive in our work as a school district, as a university community, to instill in young people in particular. But all these years later and after this very difficult year that we've all experienced and we're coming out of, I'd say I would add 2 more qualities, and that is smart, nice, inclusive, and just. And I see our school district, and particularly the leaders around this table, working hard to instill those kinds of qualities in our young people. And I see it at the university and in our community too. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for being a partner with us in this ongoing effort as we move forward.
Thank you.
Scotty, I don't know if you want me to tie it up or if you want to add, but I want to just add that it is a blessing to be amongst this group of people, not only those up on the screen. Scotty has become one of probably my best friends. I think that this community of people brings out the best in anyone they're around, and I feel especially blessed to represent the Oshkosh Area School District and help with this initiative. So it's just been like mission work. That's what we say all the time. Who wouldn't want to surround themselves with these kinds of people? So it's been a true blessing for me. But Scotty, then I don't know if you have anything to add. But thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for bringing this forward. We appreciate the shared commitment.
Thank you for your kind comments, Linda. I also want to thank this group for giving me the opportunity to put a sport coat on for the second time in 1 year. Okay, thank you all very much, and we look forward to our continued work for the Board of Education and the Oshkosh Public Schools. Bless you all for what you do.
Thank you very much. Do any board members have any questions or comments for our presenters tonight?
Kind of hits your heart.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I find your topic tonight especially poignant, having visited 3 of our schools yesterday. And I repeatedly heard from staff in those 3 buildings, which were Emmeline Cook, Franklin, and Carl Traeger Elementary, how many of these qualities they were seeing in the students who had come back, how grateful the students were to be in school, to be with their peers, to be with their teachers and other staff members. And it's in every one of those schools, and I spent almost an hour in each of those, and I know that's only a snapshot view, but I was so impressed with the demeanor of the students, how seemingly calm and relaxed they were, and how kind they were to one another, complimenting one another. They complimented the mask I was wearing yesterday, and they were very curious about that. It said, and the mask said, if you can be anything in life, be kind. And a couple of kids picked up on that. But anyway, it was so poignant to hear these qualities that you have espoused as a group for more than 10 years in this community, and to actually see that in practice in our schools. So thank you. Thank you for all you're doing, and you will continue to do, I'm sure, to promote this message in our community. All right, well, thank you very much, and thank you to those who have joined us virtually, including Dr. Bowen and Karen Doreen. I don't see Margie Davy up there, but I know she was mentioned, so maybe she has already exited. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in the cold weather.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
All right, and thank you to Mrs. Piron for representing the district so well in this endeavor. Next, we have the 2021-2022 school calendar with Dr. Pinkston, Dr. Brown, and Ms. Conrad.
All right, we decided since the calendar looks so similar to this past year that we would just highlight a couple things that have shifted from this year's calendar, or from last year's calendar to next year's. So the first thing that you will notice is the spring break is back to that last full week in March. And so that's March 21st through the 25th. That it does align with some of the college spring breaks, and so I think families will be happy in those areas. And we were able to do that because of where testing dates fell this year, or for next year. And then the other big change that you'll see, it's not a huge change, it's a slight shift. This year we have graduation taking place on Memorial Day in the evening, and then on the following Wednesday. Next year, we're going to shift it to the Friday before Memorial Day weekend, and then that following Wednesday. We're doing that so that families are home and they can celebrate and then go on their Memorial Day weekend if that is what they hope to do. So those are the two big changes. But what questions do you have for us?
I'll jump in with a question. I was wondering if you could help me understand what the floating PD means, and I'm assuming it's matched to the 14 hours due to shortened calendar.
Yeah. So you're seeing, so we're going to have two calendars go out this year. There's going to be the calendar with just the regular calendar dates, and then the one that we put in here is so that you can see the extra square. Those are the additional teacher days to help remind them of what we have built up through the last decade. And so there are some pieces in there from the days of district points. And when we took the district points away, we said you would have up to 14 hours to do professional development. And so, for example, this summer in August, we're going to be having conscious discipline for our elementary teachers. And so that's just a part of their day because of past practices. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I figured it was something where they maybe did some summer training and it counted.
Yeah. So the families won't receive that portion of it, but the teachers will have it on theirs, just so it's a refresh.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to hear it instead of assume it. Thanks.
No, thank you.
Did I miss snow days, or are they built in?
They're still there.
So one of the goals of the calendar committee has been and we've been asked to condense the school calendar because in the past we've gone pretty far into the month of June. So to do that at the different levels over time, we've increased the number of instructional minutes per day. And so with 177 student days increasing instructional minutes per day, we meet the state requirements, we exceed the state requirements, and so we have banked or overage of instructional minutes or time. And so because of that, we had two built-in snow days previous to that. And so I believe this will be the third calendar where we've removed those because we have the overage of instructional minutes, and we can condense down in the last day of school is moved up in June.
Thank you.
So,
Mr. Peschel.
explain the 8/10. So why not just say 6, but it says 5 8/10?
Because we're held to a requirement of instructional minutes and hours. So to get down to that, when you calculate it out, the instructional minutes and hours come out to be a 0.8 of a day. And we want every single minute or piece, because if we have a late start, think about if we have a late start due to weather, etc. We want to be able to absorb that up through the 0.8. So we calculate down to the minute how much instructional time and report that to the Department of Public Instruction. So that's where the 0.8 comes from.
Okay, thank you.
One question.
Are there any questions or comments on the calendar for the 2021-2022 school year? Did we have input from the high schools on the graduation days? So they were in agreement with the choice of the Friday and the following, what did you say, Wednesday?
Yes.
Okay. Everybody likes to know when graduation day is.
And we're really fortunate that the arena is working with us because that's a very large span of days between.
Yes.
And they're allowing us to do that, so feeling very grateful.
Oh, yes, thank you. Mr. Peschel, did you have something else?
She answered my question.
Okay.
So.
That's a wonderful venue. We're grateful for the opportunity to have used that for a couple of classes now. Other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you, presenters tonight, and all the people who you worked with to bring the calendar to this level. So I believe we'll be voting on this formally at the next board meeting in 2 weeks, on the 24th. Thank you. Our third workshop this evening is partially self-funded insurance with Drew Nehans, Executive Director of Business Services, and a friend.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
We are going to be doing the overview for what we're going to be recommending for self-insuring. And I've got Jan Stage, our consultant for the health benefits with USI. And he is going to kind of walk everyone through what self-funding is, or a partially self-funded plan is, how it differs from fully insured, and why it would benefit the district to pursue at least seeing what that kind of plan would mean for us in our district. So I'll turn it over to Jan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So self-funding. So my goal is to educate and inform as an option for the school district as we look forward. And so the first slide here, where are we at today? So the school district is fully insured, which means the risk is being transferred to the insurance company for a premium. Okay. And as we look back at the last 5 years, the trend, average rate of increase per year, has been about 7%. And the question is, can the school district continue to do that? So next slide. So what we did was, to further show, we went back to 2016 through 2021 and showing the actual numbers. Some years were better than others, but if you average it out, it's 7%. And so as we look forward, if you stay fully insured, you would expect that to continue. And the way to impact that staying fully insured would be to change benefits, which in effect would be eroding benefits, shifting cost onto the employees. So what is self-funding? And let me clarify. What we're talking about is partially self-funding, which means that there would be insurance protection in place, which is stop loss, and we'll address that in the next slide. But self-funding is, instead of transferring all that risk to the insurance companies, maintaining some of that. But I would also equate taking some of that risk is also getting some flexibility with the plan over time. So components of the plan, two things we want to talk about. One is self-funding. The employer acts as its own insurance company, but most employers, especially schools, aren't equipped to do that. So you hire someone to do that, and it's commonly called a third-party administrator. For point of reference, looking back to when the county, or when the school district was with the Wisconsin Counties Association, they used a TPA, third-party administrator, UMR. So the school district would have to hire someone like UMR to administer the plan for them, to pay claims, to provide customer service, to deal with providers. And then the other part is the providers, who would be available, doctors, hospitals, physicians. And what I wanted to point out here is today with the Anthem plan, it is what's called a narrow network. So in the Oshkosh community, Aurora is available as in plan, and so is ThedaCare. Ascension is not. And so it's a narrow network. So in looking at possible options under a self-funded plan, if it's a narrow network, it wouldn't be any different than it is today. The other option is to go to a broad network and include Ascension in that. So those would be options that we would want to look at as possible options with going self-funding. So stop loss, so partially self-funded, two kinds of stop loss that are in play. One is specific, so that would be per individual. So if you have a family of 4, the limit would apply to each individual. So let me further the example. Let's say one person has claims and we set a limit. Let's just say it's $100,000. Could be more, could be less, depending on our analysis for the school district. But under this analysis, $100,000, any claims incurred under that would be paid by the school district. Anything over would be paid by stop loss. So that's one kind of insurance. The second is what's called aggregate. An aggregate is on the whole plan, and it would set a limit too, that once dollars exceed a certain amount for the whole plan, insurance would kick in and pay everything over and above that. So you have two kinds of protection to make sure the plan runs it. And the reason, the specific stop loss is really cash flow protection. And it allows you to go from year to year, protect that risk, and makes it go forward. So, quick summary between the two payments. Fully insured carrier, they take care of that. Self-funding, up until the stop loss, the employer does. Assumption of risk, we've already talked about that. Fully insured, that's fully transferred. Self-funded, the employer keeps some of it. Plan design, there is less flexibility with fully insured, more flexibility with self-funding. And so it gives the employer additional levers to pull in managing the plan over time. And then lastly, compliance. Generally speaking, fully insured is subject to state regulation, Office of the Commissioner of Insurance. Self-funded plans, generally speaking, are regulated by the federal government. Now, there are some state laws that apply to public employers for self-funding we'd have to be aware of, but in general. There's a lot here. I only want to point out two things. And then, one is the top one, where there is a noticeable difference between the administrative cost for a fully insured versus a self-funded plan. So there's a savings opportunity there. The next one is the green area, pooling versus stop loss. So fully insured, what they call it is pooling. And so they have a pooling premium and a pooling limit. And it's very comparable to stop loss and the deductible. With the fully insured plan, the insurance company determines what the pooling point is and what the pooling charge is. There is no negotiation. They determine that. With stop loss, we've got a whole market to go to work with. There's 15 to 20 insurance companies that offer stop loss, so we can let the market work for the employer and usually get better terms as a result. So there's opportunities in both of those areas. So how are we doing year to date? And so we're showing, this is with Anthem Blue Cross from January through October of 2020. And you'll see the loss ratio on the bottom right, the 100%. So what does that mean? So Anthem's target loss ratio is 85%. So that's 15% that they have for their overhead. So if I'm looking ahead and seeing and projecting a renewal for 2022 using simple underwriting. So we're at 100% loss ratio, their target is 15. We need at least, it's 85, we would need 15% to get back up. And then add in trend, we're talking about 20+%. Now, for self-funded, target loss ratio is probably going to be in the low 90s. And so we talk about opportunity to save money long term, that's one of the opportunities. So the next 3 slides, I'm not going to go into detail, but what we're showing here is that we're showing different starting points, but we're showing the long-term impact of being self-funded. And through these analysis, we show long-term it shows that self-funding is the way to go. So we know long-term self-funding is a good option. What we don't know is it a good option now? Is it a good option for 2022? And we'll look at some numbers to help us determine that. So I'll just go through all those. Yeah, keep going. There we go. So opportunities. Let me talk about long-term for the school district or any employer. Best practice is when you have a health plan and a clinic and a well-being program, and the health risk assessments for the school districts is part of the well-being plan. It's important that you coordinate those, that they're working in the same direction toward the same goals to help control costs and keep down spend. It's really hard to do that with a fully insured plan. And the reason being, the incentives aren't aligned. As an example, your current plan. Aurora is part owner of that plan. Their incentive is to get people to Aurora. It's not to get people to your clinic. That's a conflict. With a self-funded plan, it's much easier to do that, to align those three programs. Again, same goals, same opportunities. Self-funding isn't new, and there are a lot of other employers, public employers, that are doing it. Self-funding with public employers isn't as prevalent as it is in the private sector. And what I've found in my career, it has a lot to do with the employer's comfort level and experience in working with self-funding. And if the employer doesn't have someone who's experienced and comfortable, they tend to stay away. I think the opportunity for the school district is Drew's experience in that area and the success that he's had. This is further evidence. So this is by number of workers, and if you look between 1,000 and 4,999 employees, 87% of private employers are self-funded. The number with public employers is a little bit less for the reasons I just stated, but it's not new, it's common, and it's working for other employers. So what we try to do here is answer the question of, is it right for the school district right now? And we made some assumptions here. So let me explain. So the administrative costs and stop loss, so on Anthem's side, we're showing what we project to be a 15% increase for 2022. And if you add up the administrative costs and stop loss, that adds up to 15% of the total. And the stop loss really for Anthem is the pooling point and the pooling charge. And then HRA claims, the way things work today is that the school district pays the HRA fee, our costs outside of the health plan. So we have to add that in. And then showing the projection of just over 29 million. Self-funding side, we're showing the administrative cost. Notice the difference. These just under 700,000 for partially self-funded, that's a real number. I'm confident in saying we can get that in the market today. Okay. Now the next two numbers, I'm not so sure about sitting here today. They are estimates. And so you can't hold me to them right now. And that stop loss, and so what we did was we looked at similar employers, similar size, and see what the costs were. That's our projection. And then medical claims, we use the information we have. One of the issues that we have with Anthem is getting timely information. So when we showed the information from Anthem, it went through October. That was the most recent information we could get, and that's what we used to project that. That's not recent information. And so that leads to my concern about the credibility of the numbers we're showing, which is one of the other positives of being self-funded is access to more current information. And so even with all that, we add the totals, and it's showing a possibility of self-funding being a better deal. So is that enough to make a decision on today? No, it's not. And so our recommendation is why don't we get real numbers? Why don't we do a bid process, do both fully insured and self-funded? We can start the process in May. We can have the numbers come back in June and get them to you by late June, early July for a decision at that time. And see if, and we can have firm numbers on the stop loss and on the expected claims to make a better decision, as well as the actual renewal on a fully insured basis. So that's what we have.
Questions?
Well, I know that you had brought this back up. We had first talked about some facility and finance, and I asked a lot of questions there because I didn't understand all of it. I have two quick questions. Is you got the 15%, obviously off of, is that realistic what we think they're going to ask for? Because there we were at 100.5%. They're going to try to make up that loss for the futures. I mean, even if we try to negotiate with them in the spring, they're going to come back with at least 12%, 11%. And it's been a long time since they've been underneath that.
Do you want to, this past renewal,
Yeah.
can you give them the numbers on that?
So this last renewal,
Yeah.
the original calculation came up at like 26%.
And they were at a 91 stop loss. So they profited 9%. And they came at a 27% renewal.
And we did negotiate that down to the 7 that we ended up getting.
Right.
Will they do that again? I don't think they'll do it to that extent. I don't think if the numbers come in at 20 plus, will they knock 20% off? I don't think that'll happen.
Right.
That's my crystal ball, I
Okay.
understand. But I don't think that'll happen.
Okay. And then the stop loss insurance, was that a both or was that a choice? So you could choose to have it per patient or per, insured person, or as a whole number. So do you do both of them, or you choose one or the other?
My recommendation would be to do both.
Both, right.
Yes.
Yep.
And
And
so-
that 1.6 million, was that including both? Your estimations and those
Yes.
numbers? Okay.
Until if we move to a self-insured plan, until you have an established plan.
Right.
Where you've got
Can
several
bank
years of
millions,
history and
yep.
you've got some when you're pretty secure in what your fund balance is there.
Right.
Then you can look at getting rid of that aggregate one, the top end one.
Yes.
But at the first couple of years especially, it's highly recommended that you do that aggregate to make sure that you know what your top budget number is, can't get breached.
So then you'll have
That's an
that.
extra safeguard for you.
Right, so then you'd have that extra money in the fund balance if you just happen to have one or two a year that the numbers just jump up, and then you have your stop loss jumping in there, and then that goes up. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay, those are the questions I had.
That's the,
Sorry.
the profit margin you're talking about with insurance companies. Our employees can do everything that they can do to come in under their estimated rate claims, and we'll probably still get an increase because
The likelihood, in my experience, the likelihood of running a plan to a loss ratio of what fully insured providers are expecting for their shareholders is going to be few and far between, which is why you typically are seeing trends in the fully insured world of a minimum of the 7% range, and lately they've been trending more towards double digits because of the need to get that profit.
And then let me add just, the target is 85%. Let's just say that you hit the 85%, what should you expect for renewal the next year? It should be trend, because you're expecting healthcare costs to go up by trend, 7%. So if you hit 85, you should still expect a 7% increase.
Right, the 7% is trend.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's the difference in the partially self-insured world. As Jan was saying earlier, if our goal is in the low 90s in the self-insured, we can choose not to increase our premiums and say, we're going to ride it out. We can trend it. You're going to stop loss market. You market that every single year. So you can potentially make up some of that trend within your RFPing of the stop loss on the market as well. So then there's no need with a 91 loss ratio, there's no need to increase premiums, there's no need to do anything different from the prior year. And that's what you're gonna end up finding is more accurate within the districts that are doing this, is they're able to maintain a much, if they are increasing premiums, they're not as often and not as much, because we don't need to see that profit margin.
We've had emails from retirees recently regarding district insurance. What would this self-funding or partial self-funding mean to our retirees?
In my opinion, it would be, let me back up. Let's explain a little bit about what happened to the retirees. So we went from years past in WEA, very flexible in dealing with the retirees and offering that benefit. The school district then went with Wisconsin Counties Association that agreed to mirror whatever WEA was doing. And then we went to Anthem, who didn't agree to that. So we had to make things fit with what they were willing to offer. And it was a tight, it was a tough transition for retirees, and that's probably what you heard. And it's just not something that Anthem is good at doing. And with a self-funded plan, as we talked earlier, there is more flexibility. And so we could set up what was needed and do what we needed to do probably better than what's being done today.
Thank you. I appreciate that response. Mr. Peschel.
Sure. So I guess my question relates to the broad and narrow aspects of this. So when we go out to bid, is that something that we let them provide to us, whether they're going to offer a broad or narrow network, or is that something that we can ask for in our bids?
I would say both. So when we've gone out to bid in the past, we ask for both. And what we've been seeing, without exception, is that the narrow network options are lower priced.
Sure.
That there is an advantage to that.
Okay.
I do, one of the things that we will be asking for when we go out to bid though, that kind of, it's not within a narrow or a wider network. One of the things that you're able to do within self-insuring that's much more difficult in a fully insured world, that will be part of this, is making the connections with the OSIs of the world, the Novo Healths, and driving where you have preferred partners that are getting best outcomes with the lowest costs. And the Novo Healths of the world, they're doing procedures for a fraction of the cost of what your Auroras are doing that for, and getting better outcomes. We're able to partner with them in a self-insured world where you're not going to get those partnerships in a fully insured world. So that also kind of gets into this of what of those kinds of arrangements are we able to get into, and the TPAs and that we're going to be looking for in that world. What are the arrangements that they're able to make, and what aren't they? So that'll be part of it.
If we go to bid on this, would they hear that we might be thinking about going fully insured, and then their percentages could come down, or doesn't that matter to them? I mean, do they look at that? Do they think about, is that gonna be, so what I worry is if we don't go, if we get all these bids and then all of a sudden they're really lowballed because they know we're looking at self-insured, and then we go and we sign this for another year, and then the next year they jack them up again, the percentage rates. Like, then you're playing this game all the time. So how does that work?
That's a possible outcome.
Okay.
I mean, we've seen it before here with bids, not necessarily last year, but the year before with the network health plan bid.
Yep.
Really low and hard, from a claims analysis standpoint, really hard to justify that it could happen.
Okay. I just worry about that mistake, unless we can, you can lock them in for 1 year at like 3%, and then maybe the next year at 5%. I've seen us do that before. They've come to us with that, but I don't know that, if they get wind of that we're looking at doing what Sheboygan has done and some other districts have done, that they're gonna kind come back at you and say, well, then we'll do this. Okay. Just wanted that out there that they could do that.
Yeah, to me, the difference with the two ways, the two philosophies of this is, one, you're mitigating all your risk and you're willing to give them the profit. And you know they're getting profit.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how much are they getting. Is it worth giving that risk away to know that you're gonna do that and they want their 15% every year, whether or not they get that, that's their goal. Or are you willing to take some of the risk, offshoot the high risk, because we can insure that part, and capture maybe 8% profit on your own, because you still have to mitigate some risk? Are you willing to do that? Is it worth the risk? In my opinion, when you're looking at a $30 million plan, that number is large enough for a 7-8% profit that, to me, it's worth the risk.
And the profit we set aside to always have on hand to mitigate those losses or that risk. Like, we use that to continuously use it within the budget itself.
There's different ways you can deal with the surpluses you're gonna get.
Okay.
The way I've had it set up in the past,
Okay.
and the way I like to kind of do it, is automatically whatever percentage our employees are paying
Yep.
as their portion of the premium, that direct percentage of whatever the surplus is gets automatically thrown back into the fund balance
Okay.
on top, right off the bat. Because
Okay.
that's their share of the surplus, the profit. Then we look at the rest of it, that would be the district share, and decide, is our fund balance good over here? Are we adequate? And that's where we work with Jan to, where's our comfort level? There's usually a few months of premium is what you want to have in there for sure. So where are we on that comfort level of knowing we have enough for the, oops, we may be going over. But then also then looking at where else, if we're set and we're good with our fund balance, now it's up to the discretion of what do we want to do. In my prior district, we did a combination. I enhanced benefits, so we had an on-site clinic, a district of 800 kids, and we had an on-site clinic. We funded it through the surpluses. We had a matching 403B program for retirement that we did through the surpluses. We had a lot of programs and benefits that we were able to fund. We also did do a roof. We did some maintenance on facilities because our surpluses were getting so large, they couldn't just sit there. So we were able to do that as well. Every district runs that a little differently, and it's part of an annual decision that ends up coming back to the board on, here's where we are, here's where we're sitting, what do we want to do? Here's some possibilities. How do we want to manage that?
Great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments from the board? I do have a question on the timeline that you outlined in terms of timeliness of going out for bids, getting them back, making decisions and so on. I know that there have been some concerns expressed about the timeline in the past. I don't know if it was this particular timeline or another one. When does the renewal go into effect? If it is that way, or the decision to go partially self-funding have to be made?
So that the renewal is for January 1.
Okay.
And so the difficulty we've had in the past is waiting, and this is part of the issue, waiting for the fully insured carriers to come back with renewal rates. And more often than not, we weren't getting them until a September 1 date or something like that. Excuse me. With self-funding, you don't have to wait that long. There's flexibility in making decisions much earlier. And what that does is help with the renewal process, the educating, getting information, the enrollment, and so forth.
I think one of the issues in the past may have been that because the information wasn't shared with staff in what they perceived as a timely manner, and it was a narrow network, situation, and some were going to have to change from one position to the next, and they weren't happy about those network changes. And so giving our staff sufficient time to know what's happening, I think, is really critical.
And I know if the board's agreeable to us going to RFP for both models and seeing which one's going to be the most effective, I've actually already started this conversation. So we had met with the teachers group. I've actually had 2 meetings with some of their leadership centered around self-funding and my thoughts around it and trying to answer some of their questions just up front. And obviously they saw it on the board agenda. So when we had our meeting last night, it came up and they're like, what's going on? Tell us more. So I have given them some information, trying to keep it high enough level that in case that isn't the direction we go, it's not anything that is causing concern on their end. But it is something that if we are going to go that way, I will definitely be reaching back out to all the different groups and sitting down with not only the leadership, but starting to spend time sitting down and using Jan as well to say, okay, here's the presentation, how can we answer your questions? I know some of their biggest concerns is they're going to lose their doctors. Well, Aurora's our primary, where the majority of our claims are going now. No matter what system we're in, it doesn't make sense to get rid of where the majority of our people already go. So that it's just kind of answering those questions for them and letting them know. And again, I mean, I'm on the insurance plan. I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'm not comfortable with the doctors or medical facility. So it's kind of just making sure that they're reassured in that way as well.
Thank you. Mr. Peschel.
Sure, thank you. So let's say that we do a partially self-funded program. What does that mean for every year then? Do we go back out? What parts do we go back out to bid for related to that program?
Okay. So if you're going partially self-funded, that's a commitment. That means that's where you're going. Yeah. So the county has been, with Winnebago County, self-funded since 2017. We did go out for fully insured just to see where it was at this past year. They decided to stay self-funded. So you do bid stop loss every year.
Okay.
You may check the administrator every 4 or 5 years, and maybe check fully insured every 4 or 5 years. But that's just checking the market and doing due diligence. Self-funding is a commitment. That's something you're looking to do long term.
Right.
If you start
So really, you're kind of suggesting that if we do go to partially self-funded, that you want us to commit to minimally like 3 years or so, and then routinely create a process to determine whether that's still the right program for our district.
I agree with that. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you both for all of your work on this, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more as we move forward.
Does he need direction? Do we want him?
It sounded like
Yeah.
the board's agreeable to us really going to
Yep.
RFP
Yes.
on
Yes.
both models.
Yes.
And we'll be coming back in the timeframe that Jan had discussed later towards summer of what the updates of all that was.
Very good.
And we'll be in the FNF and might be giving updates as well.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks
Thank
very much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
so
Stage. And thank you, Mr. Nehans. At this time, we have a proclamation to read, and I'm sorry that the order got a little bit confusing, but it's my pleasure to read this proclamation for the Oshkosh Civility Project. Whereas the Oshkosh Civility Project is a community-based initiative that pledges to, quote, build a stronger and more diverse community by actively sharing our our ideas and opinions with others in thoughtful and considerate ways, end of quote. And whereas the Oshkosh Civility Project affirms the value and worth of each individual and encourages everyone to work in partnership with one another to build stronger, healthier families, communities, businesses, organizations, and schools. By practicing basic commitment to civility, we learn and grow from one another. And whereas the Oshkosh Civility Project has 9 principles: pay attention, listen, be inclusive, don't gossip, show respect, be agreeable, apologize sincerely, give constructive comments, suggestions and feedback, and accept responsibility. And whereas the Oshkosh Area School District pledged its support to the Oshkosh Civility Project 10 years ago, now therefore be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District urges all citizens to become familiar with and practice the 9 principles from the Oshkosh Civility Project, reaffirm its continued pledge with the Oshkosh Civility Project, and does hereby proclaim February 2021 as Oshkosh Civility Project Awareness Month. So on behalf of the Oshkosh Civility Project, we have 2 members of their steering committee, Julia and Linda. So we would like to present you with this proclamation as one of the many collaborative partnerships that the Oshkosh Area School District enjoys with members of the community. So thank you to both of you and to the other presenters this evening and to everyone who's contributed to this most worthy project for our community and our schools.
They want to wear this
Thank you,
everywhere
ladies.
right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Yes, thank you.
It's always a pleasure to recognize success and positivity, so thank you.
Are we able to make any comments related to this?
Yes, it's on the agenda, so you may make a comment, absolutely.
All right. I'll wait for them. You guys are glowing over the proclamation. So I guess I want to speak from experience a little bit in relation to this and experience and growth. So many of you know, and members of the community know, I've served our community in many different capacities as an elected figure, as an elected official. Hopefully I'll be able to talk. So I was on the city council at the time that the school district and the city of Oshkosh took up the proclamation and their adherence to it and the utilization of it within and throughout the community. And I want to be honest with you, my mindset at that time was a little iffy about it. It's not about civility. It's not about liking, not liking the principles of it. But I was more of a rabble-rouser at the time. I felt that a little disagreement was not necessarily a bad thing. And this actually rewards people not agreeing with that, with agreeing with each other, but just understanding how to work with each other. And so I wasn't necessarily on board with it in the sense that I didn't fully entertain it as something that I would fully practice as a community leader. And that was just where I was at that time as an elected leader and probably even as a person. So, so my experience and growth over time, and really the last year of being an elected leader, has really brought me to look closer at the Civility Project and its merits and its benefits in our community. And I fully, I still look for ways to not agree with people, and you guys know that. But I look for ways to be civil and respectful and to be able to hear what people are saying through this. And the last year has made it very hard for civility to kind of ring through our community. It's really hard for people to hear each other at this point. And my hope is that our community starts to hear that this renewal of civility in our community is needed, and that we engage it, and that we utilize it, and that we take steps to repairing civility as we know it and understand it in our community. It's not the last year. We all know this. We all know the impacts of what the last year has done to not just our community, but many other communities. But that we also have to practice civility, practice patience, practice listening, practice being kind, practice disagreeing with each other to be able to find common grounds. And then I think ultimately that's what the Civility Project is about, is finding that common ground so that we can move forward in our community instead of backwards. And that we can do it in a way that is respectful and civil to all people, because I wouldn't wish this on the next generation 100 years from now. What we elected leaders and what community leaders have gone through. Would never wish it on another generation. And I hope that our community realizes that as well. That that civility is something that holds our community together. It's our glue, and that we can work past this last year, and that we can work together to improve and create better foundations in our community. And that this is just one aspect of this. These are just some ideas that really common sense ideas that every one of us by now have learned at one point to follow. So I'm really happy that we are renewing our adherence to the Civility Project. I hope that the city does it as well, and I hope that other bodies of government do it as well. My real hope is that we take this proclamation and we take this card, or maybe even the awesome poster again, and that we put it on this table right in front of us here, so that everyone who comes into this room understands the proclamation that the district has taken and that community leaders have taken, and that many people who have come into this room in the last 6 months are also leaders. They're also voices in our community, and that this can help shape their experience as well. And to know that when you speak at this table, that message is not just speaking to us. It's speaking to all other families in the community. It's speaking to children. It's speaking to other leaders. And in the world that we live in today, it's speaking to the whole world. So, so my hope is that this goes on this table for every meeting that we have from here on out. And that if we could have more of the cards, and that they're placed maybe over on that table, so that when people come in, they can be engaged with that, with this proclamation, because with this proclamation comes an expectation of civility in this room. So, and I think we understand that. And I think we need to renew that with our community, that that is also something that is expected in this space. Because if you expect it from us, we expect it from them, from everyone. So that's all I have. Thank you.
That was very powerful, Mr. Peschel. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, there's someone with no rehearsal. He just did that.
That was very good. Very, very powerful, as I said. All right, moving on, our next agenda item then is a request for future agenda items. Does anyone have a request for a future item on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, are there any announcements at this time? Seeing none, our next agenda item is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Herzog?
Yes, aye.
Olmsted?
Aye.
Peschel?
Aye.
Szilagyi?
Aye.
Evans?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. We're back in 2 weeks.
Thank you for bringing this forward.